Hi, I'm fat. That description could apply to a lot of Americans, and I am one of them. However, I haven't always lived in America. I also lived in Wuhan, China for 11 years, and today I would like to tell you about that. Here's a photo that I took of the Yellow Crane Tower back in 2008, my first year in Wuhan. The photo is grainy and of poor quality because in 2008, I had a really sucky digital camera. Here I am in 2009 during the second half of my first year in Wuhan, where I was working as an English teacher. At this time, I weighed about 220 pounds. 220 pounds is already morbidly obese, but I was going to get much bigger as the years went on. Hopefully you're enjoying my glamour shots. Here's a photo from late June of 2019. Only a few days before I left Wuhan, maybe forever. At this point, I was a little bit over 300 pounds. During my entire stay in China, my weight meant that I was perceived as an oddity at best and an atrocity at worst. Although Chinese people come in all shapes and sizes, the obesity rate in China hovers somewhere between 5 and 6% of the population. In my home state of Maine, the obesity rate is 31.7% of the population. In Maine, I was kind of normal, at least insofar as I could assume that everybody I met was used to encountering people my size or bigger on a daily basis. In China, I was a freakish outlier. But I tried to make the most of it. I put a lot of effort into learning Mandarin. I was actually excited when I began to understand that the people I passed on the street were constantly talking about me and my weight. I was like, yeah, woohoo! My listening skills are so on par. She just called me a fat pig and I understood it. I am so smart, yeah. Now, in Mandarin, there are two words that mean fat. One is peng. Peng is a somewhat neutral descriptive adjective, on par with words like tall, old, and young. Of course, nobody wants to be called da pengzi, but peng isn't always negative. You might use peng to describe a chubby baby, or a beloved fat cartoon cat like Garfield. The other Chinese word for fat is fei. This word is more universally negative. You'd call somebody fei if you wanted to express disgust at their size. If you're talking about losing weight, you'd use the term jianfei, with jian meaning to reduce and fei being both the noun form of fat and the less friendly adjective form of fat. I heard both peng and fei constantly. I was always hearing stuff like, 这个老外太肥了。哎呦，大胖子来了。他的屁股好大呀。Initially, I took this all really hard. I felt like I had been granted telepathy, and I was suddenly privy to every negative perception that anybody had ever had of me. I felt like I was universally hated just because I was fat. I assumed that people from every country wanted to claw their eyes out when they saw me and my big, huge, offensively fat body. And I assumed that my fellow Americans were just too polite to say anything. That was a bit overdramatic of me, to say the least. but that is where I was at. That is also how I ended up finding the fat acceptance movement. I first encountered it over on LiveJournal. If you remember LiveJournal, you're old, but you know, it was a fun blogging platform while it lasted. And I found fat acceptance in the LiveJournal group Fatshionista. I posted photos of myself in pretty outfits there. Most of those outfits custom made because it was impossible for me to buy pre-made clothes in my size in China. The feedback I got was about how lovely and smart and brave and even healthy I was. People would say things like, "Wow, you're so amazing to travel in a foreign country where people are so unfairly critical of you. You know, there's nothing wrong with your weight. You're just perfect the way you are." And this made me feel better. This was also, as with many things in our lives, a double-edged sword. I developed more self-confidence and thicker skin. These were both super helpful and continue to be. I often say that my skin is the thickest part of me, which is saying a lot because at the beginning of this video I showed you my arm, and my arm is pretty thick. But in addition to the thick skin and the self-confidence and all that good stuff, I also stopped caring about how much I weighed, and I almost made a hobby out of over-consuming, which was easy to do in Wuhan because the food scene there is out of this world good. So, you know, I got bigger and experienced negative health consequences as I got older, but that is a story for another day. So going back to my fat fabulous life in Wuhan, China, once I stopped using fat as a reason to hate myself, I was able to realize that the people of Wuhan also didn't hate me for being fat and weren't in general being cruel. They were just commenting on what they saw. Even when people were calling me fey, the bad word for fat, it reflected more on the fact that they didn't want to be fat like me than it did on their feelings towards me as a person. When I got to actually speaking with people instead of just listening or judging them on their reactions, most of them were incredibly kind and generous. I had honest to God situations where I was near tears because a taxi driver had asked me to sit in the middle seat because he was convinced that my weight would throw off the balance of his car, which it wouldn't have, but that's neither here nor there. But as I got out, that same taxi driver offered me his umbrella because it was raining and he didn't want me to get wet walking the few feet back to my apartment. This wasn't a guy who hated me or was out to get me. This was just a guy who was surprised and alarmed at my size, which was very unusual in Wuhan and isn't healthy or good for you anywhere in the world. I felt like I was also given every chance to succeed at my job. There was this one time when one of my Chinese co-teachers told me she had expected somebody as fat as me to be lazy and was relieved to find out that I wasn't. And I think this made me kind of a workaholic. I cared a lot about people approving of me, And since I felt like my weight tended to give people a negative first impression, I would just completely throw myself into my job to try to prove people wrong. In retrospect, I wish I'd started trying to lose weight sooner instead of spending all of my time trying to make the perfect PowerPoints while just like shoving noodles into my mouth. But the PowerPoints got me instant approval, while losing weight would have taken time and not necessarily guaranteed the same kind of positive response that I was after. So yeah, all in all, I don't feel like being fat held me back from making friends and being successful as a foreigner in China. I might have developed some new neuroses because of it, but I came out okay, and I really value the experiences I had in China, and I'm so glad that I went there. Being in China made me hyper aware that I was fat and that other people noticed, but it also made me hyper aware of so many other good things and good people in this world. I should probably end this video with a disclaimer that since I'm not Chinese, there wasn't really an expectation that I would fit in with the rest of Chinese society anyway. I can't talk about what it feels like to be a fat Chinese person in China or abroad, but I can talk about my experience being a fat foreigner and how it shaped me. Thank you so much if you've watched all of this video. Feel free to comment or like or subscribe.